Go record. Nice. Hello everyone. So quick introduction to me. Why am I here? Why am I talking to you? Well, my name's Tim Skinner. I'm the author of a book called The Way of the Lion, which is a book that thinks about, there it is, the apologetics of the Chronicles of Narnia, and it's based on my postgraduate work of the same name, which I have here. And don't be fooled by the thickness of the book. It's only printed on one side because I wanted to make it look more impressive than it actually is. This is available on Amazon Kindle, but please don't buy it because it's available for free on academia.edu. So please get it from there if you're interested. Now, that's why I've been asked to talk to you today, because we're going to talk about the Lion, the Witch, and the Wardrobe. But before we start, I would like to give you a quick quiz. So feel free to unmute yourselves and shout out the answers. Peter, I think you might have a slightly unfair advantage, but let's see how we go. First question. Who is the most quoted Christian author of the 20th century?
Yes,
It's not a difficult one. Here's slightly more tricky. In which UK city was C.S. Lewis born?
Belfast.
Very good. Well done. Belfast, indeed. Now, here's a nastier one. In which Worcestershire town did Lewis lose his Christian faith? Oh.
I hope it wasn't Redditch.
It wasn't Redditch. I don't know that he ever came to Redditch. But he certainly spent a lot of time in Malvern, where he went to school. And it was at school, around about the age of 13, that he lost his Christian faith. Where did Lewis study and then work? Great Bookham doesn't count. Oxford, yeah. Can anyone name either of the colleges? No, it wasn't Christchurch. Just up the road from Christchurch, up Rose Lane. He studied at a university college, but he's most associated with Magdalen College. And then last question. Which famous writer was instrumental in leading Lewis back to the truth of Christianity?
Catholic.
Yes, he was a Catholic.
Yes. Lived in Birmingham.
He was educated at the Edward VI School just opposite Birmingham University. What was his name?
That Cardinal Newman.
No, it wasn't Newman.
Huh?
Go on, you can do this. He was born in Bloemfontein, if that helps, in South Africa.
Oh, gosh. We'll have to give up. I don't know.
He wrote The Lord of the Rings.
Tolkien.
Really?
Really? Yeah.
Yeah, of course it was. Yeah.
Yeah. And I actually know someone who went to Tolkien was at Merton College. I know someone who was studying at Merton College as an undergrad while Tolkien was still alive, and saw him shuffling about the place. So this is all happening within living memory. So well done for all of you who knew that. And for those of you who didn't know and learned, perhaps you've learned something that'll help you win a quiz sometime in the future. Now, I do imagine that most of you know the plot of The Lion, the Witch, and the Wardrobe already. But, just to refresh your memories, here is a brief synopsis. 4 children, Peter, Susan, Edmund, and Lucy, are evacuated from London during World War II. Do any of you remember any evacuees? Were any of you evacuees?
No, but I remember them. I was a child when the war was on.
Our former church members, Janet Chaston was.
Ron was.
Oh, Ron. No, I think Janet was.
Maybe Janet. Yeah. Ron, I remember, was evacuated to a family in Derby, a railway town, famous railway town, and he in fact worked all his career on the railways.
Yeah, I only bring this up because my father was an evacuee. He was evacuated from London. That's how I come to be living in London and not with the rest of the Skinners in London. I come to be living in Worcester, not in London with the rest of the Skinners. So in the large country house they're relocated to, they discover a magic wardrobe, which is a door to another world. And in that world, they discover a land where it is always Christmas, always winter, and never Christmas. They meet a variety of creatures, such as a fawn, some talking beavers, and the White Witch. Edmund betrays his family for the promise of power and Turkish delight, and the witch tries to kill them. Then they meet the Great Lion, the son of the Emperor across the sea, Aslan, who brings back the spring and gathers an army. The witch meets with Aslan and demands the life of Edmund because he is a traitor. But Aslan offers his own life in exchange. Aslan is killed on the stone table. But once the witch and her evil army have left, the table is broken and he comes back to life. I loved the picture, by the way, that you guys did with the mice gnawing away at the bonds of Aslan. That was very cool. Now, this is first witnessed by the two girls. Remember that. They go to the witch's castle and bring back to life many whom she had turned to stone. Then they win the day. The children are made kings and queens, rule for years and years, then return to England where no time has passed and they are children once again. Excuse me just for a second while I deal with my daughter. Sorry about that, everyone. So it is very apt that I've been asked to preach this subject on Palm Sunday, because I've got three things to talk about. First one is this is a threshold text, which includes lots of, second one, logic, and third one, the gospel. Palm Sunday was a threshold event, with Jesus entering into the city in a manner that declared his kingship and accepting the worship of the crowd there. It is also the time that he enters into his real ministry, which is the rest of the Passion Week, culminating, of course, in Resurrection Sunday itself. The Lion, the Witch, and the Wardrobe is a threshold text. For example, it introduces us to the world of Narnia and the central concept of the Christian life, the gospel. There are lots of doorsteps and doorways in the story. The professor's house, the wardrobe itself, Mr. Tumnus's house, the beaver's dam, etc. We see the entrance of sin into a person's life, the entrance of redemption, the entrance of life, as Lewis puts it in his poem, The Planets, of wrath ended and woes mended, of winter past and guilt forgiven, and good fortune. This was a book which was an entrance for me to the world of Christian thought, though I didn't know it at the time. It subtly introduced both the gospel and logical reasoning. Let's talk for a moment. Oh, that's the threshold picture that I should have put up. But this one is the logic. Let's talk about logic. When Peter and Susan took their familial conundrum of competing truth claims of Lucy and Edmund to the professor with whom they were lodged, he responded in an unexpected way. There are only three possibilities. Either your sister is telling lies, or she is mad, or she is telling the truth. You know she doesn't tell lies, and it is obvious that she is not mad. For the moment, then, and unless any further evidence turns up, we must assume that she is telling the truth. Lewis started his academic career as a philosophy lecturer, so he was very well equipped to assess competing truth claims. And in this book, he prepares his young audience to do likewise. I think he hoped that they would go on and apply that logic to the person of Christ, as he does himself in Mere Christianity, with a more detailed version of the same trilemma, which is so good, I'm going to read it for you. A man who was merely a man and said the sort of things Jesus said would not be a great moral teacher. He would either be a lunatic, on a level with the man who said he was a poached egg, or else he would be the devil of hell. You must make your choice. Either this man was and is the Son of God, or else a madman, or something worse. You can shut him up for a fool, you can spit at him and kill him as a demon, or you can fall at his feet and call him Lord and God. But let us not come with any patronizing nonsense about his being a great human teacher. He has not left that open to us. He did not intend to. The reason for all of this logic encapsulated in the book is put magnificently by Richard Cunningham. Oh, no, not that Richard Cunningham. Go away. He, that's Lewis, touches the nerve of religious awe on every page. He evangelizes through imagination. The fairy tale can help to set before the imagination something that baffles the intellect. And then, having returned from fairyland to the blind glare of our own world, perhaps, just perhaps, one will see more clearly the deeper dimensions of life. The gateway to that deeper dimension is the gospel. Now, in a gathering such as this, you may laugh at my youthful ignorance, but when I was a new Christian, I imagined the gospel that I was supposed to spread to the ends of the earth to be the first 4 books of the New Testament. Over time, I learned that, I'm quoting again, the earliest converts were converted by a single historical fact, the resurrection, and a single theological doctrine, the redemption, operating on a sense of sin which they already had. And sin not against some new fancy dress law produced as a novelty by a great man, but against the old, platitudinous, universal moral law which they had been taught by their nurses and mothers. The Gospels come later, and were written not to make Christians, but to edify Christians already made. That is a quote from the Screwtape Letters number 23. In the line The Witch and the Wardrobe, we have a picture, though not a one-to-one analogy or even allegory. It is not an allegory of sin, embodied by Jadis, the White Witch, who tempts Edmund nearly to his own destruction. This is a picture we can all recognise without appeal to a personal devil or deep theological study of the Greek word porneia, that's Greek for sin. It's a human experience common to all men, and which even children can relate to. Then we have a beautiful picture of redemption as Aslan talks to Edmund and returns him to his siblings, almost unscathed. Then we have, in one of the most memorable and profound moments in all of children's literature, the brutal execution and subsequent resurrection of Aslan. Lewis once wrote a letter to one of his young fans about Aslan, who didn't yet understand who he was. He raised 4 points. 1. Arrived at the same time as Father Christmas. 2. Said he was the son of the great emperor. 3. Gave himself up for someone else's fault, to be jeered at and killed by wicked people. 4. Came to life again. Don't you really know his name in this world? We are blessed to be able not only recognize him, but even to be united with the earthly Aslan. In this world, we can and should spread the gospel of sin, resurrection, and redemption, centered on him. If we follow Lewis's example, we will do this through an imaginative world to imaginative children, or through accessible means like mere Christianity to the average man, or in deep theological terms to academics, such as in miracles. And the discarded image. Gosh, I don't know if you've ever tried reading the discarded image. That's tough. Now, whichever road we take, we should tailor it to whoever we happen to be talking to. We should keep our eyes trained on the earthly stone table and the earthly Aslan. Amen. Now, are there any questions about anything I've said today, or about anything else that I might be able to help with?
Well, while people are thinking about that, Tim, I just want to thank you for that. I mean, that was wow. That's really raised the bar. I feel a bit intimidated now, but no, that is really, really good. And Tim and I spoke earlier. I know that, Tim has got various lectures or presentations ready to go on the 7 Narnia books. So, I do know Tim would be willing to come and speak to us Tuesday evenings or occasionally on the Sunday morning. So it's just a thought there if the fellowship want to consider that. But thank you so much for that, Tim. That was really, really powerful and really good. But sorry, I will let questions see if there are any now.
One comment I recall from reading one of his books, I think he went on a bus journey, probably in London. He said, at the start of the journey, I wasn't a believer, but as I got off the bus, I realized I did believe in God. That's
right. Surprised by Joy. It's about it was actually a journey with his brother Warnie on a motorcycle to Whipsnade Zoo, I think it was. But you close enough. I mean, he tells in different ways in different places, but Surprised by Joy is that one. He was it may have been relevant that Warnie was actually an alcoholic, so perhaps being in the sidecar of a motorcycle that Warnie was driving may have had some impact on that. I don't know.
Another quote I remember, he was at a prep school in Hertfordshire, and apparently it was a declining school, and towards the end there weren't many formal lessons. I think it probably closed down, and he said they used to go off and train spot, presumably on the East Coast Main Line in the afternoons when they were supposed to be doing games.
I don't remember that one, but I believe you. I think he might have been quite a naughty child. He certainly didn't take to any sports because his thumb didn't bend. So he couldn't actually get behind any ball sports or any sports of any description. So he launched himself into reading and the field of academia. I'm also not sporty. I'm just fat. But I don't have the brain of Lewis, I'm afraid.
One thing, Tim, that always impresses me is the time aspect in C.S. Lewis's books. Everything takes place generation after generation, and yet when they come back through the wardrobe or whichever way, time has not changed. Earthly time as such has not changed. Do you have any observations on that?
Yeah, it's a fascinating thing that there's and it doesn't seem to hold any parallels either. I've seen a nice graph where they're going in at different points, but Lucy Peter-Soom, well, I mean, let's take Diggory from The Magician's Nephew. He's there at the start, the actual start of Narnia, and he's there at the very end of Narnia as well. So in one human lifetime, we see the entirety of Narnia go through thousands of years of history. There's a book by a chap whose name I can't remember, which is disgraceful, called Live Like a Narnian. And he talks about how breathing the Narnian air, and this is something that comes up in Dawn Treader, also in Silver Chair, breathing the Narnian air and living a long time in Narnia, it can change you. It changes you. It strengthens you. And if we look at that as a very rough analogy, it is not an analogy. It is. I'm very clear that it's not an analogy, and it's not a what was the other word I used?
Allegory.
Allegory. It's not an allegory. Lewis was very clear on that when he was writing about it. It's not an allegory. But if we take it that way for a moment, if we spend time with God, it can change us. We can grow up and grow and mature much quicker over one prayer session. One prayer session can completely change us as human beings. I know that's been my experience. Not every time I sit down to pray, sadly, but I remember going into a church and not being a Christian and coming out, and I was a Christian, not because it was a particularly good sermon, but because it was God was doing something with me. Amazing.
You were going to say something about the girls that found him first.
Yeah, I think that's an interesting parallel. There's loads of parallels with Jesus on the cross and Aslan on the stone table, and I just think it's really interesting that it was girls. It was the girls who saw him first. It wasn't. So it wasn't the boys, the heroes, the ones with the sword and fighting for Aslan. It was the girls, the one with the bow and the one with the healing ointment, and in the same way, after Jesus' resurrection, it wasn't the high priest who saw him, which would have been a good witness. It wasn't a Roman centurion, which would have been a good witness. It wasn't the disciples, who would have been good witnesses. It was the women, who were not considered reliable witnesses. They like in Islam today, they had half the credibility of men, and yet the fact that is what is remembered in the Christian story, in the story in all the Gospels, it means that it lends huge credibility to the Gospels because they wouldn't have made that little fact up.
Absolutely.
Just something, a question about this time. I mean, when they go into Narnia and spend ages and have adventures and all the rest of it, and they come back and it's as if time is just the same. I mean, as far as God is concerned, God's time is not the same as our human time at all. And, God is outside of human time, isn't he?
Yeah.
So, a day is to him is 1,000 years to us. So
Yes.
It's illustrating that in a sense, isn't it?
Yeah, I think that's a very valid reflection, and it's interesting that the quote is that time is that a day is like 1,000 years. So once again, it's not a maths problem for us to work out, which is something to remember when people are predicting the next rapture. But it's showing that God's time is not the same as our time. There's a nice little bit in Voyage of the Dawn Treader where Aslan says soon, and when to me all time is soon. to which of course Koryakin says, well, all time may be soon to Aslan, but to me any hungry time is dinner time.
Yeah, Tim, I was going to say, I mean, I find this aspect of time very helpful when you get in Paul's epistles speaking about the end times, end of Thessalonians there, when the Lord returns, will return, and then the dead in Christ, many years, those who have just passed many centuries before, just everyone goes together, and we should be forever with the Lord. To me, it just makes sense of the whole concept of, eternity and God's timing.
Mm.
I don't know whether I'm wrong on that, but it just makes sense to me. You know?
I'd concur. Absolutely.
Mm.
I think it's a really useful way to explore heaven in the form of Narnia,
It is.
rather than a distinct place or there's somewhere in the clouds, but that actually it's should we say a parallel universe, but actually all around us.
Yeah.
And
Parallel universe.
accessible at any time.
The language of parallel universe is incredibly useful for discussing Christian things, because heaven and hell just work really well as when you think of them in terms of parallel universe. But yeah, for more discussion of heaven and hell, or heaven particularly, the last battles got loads of really fantastic further up and further in, loads of brilliant, beautiful descriptions of what the true Narnia is. It's very platonic, but it's great. And the other thing is, he wrote a book called The Great Divorce. I do not encourage drawing theology from it, but if you want to just read a beautiful description of realities of thinking about metaphysical realities, that's the win.
Do we have any final questions?
Tim, I'm just wondering, you'll probably know it off by heart, but I think with the last battle, I think the last sentence, the last paragraph is so wonderful, isn't it? The way,
Yeah.
They're exploring heaven through the gate, the manger gate, and
Yeah.
they go, and then they look back, and they say something like, I'm quoting from memory, a story which is only just beginning or something.
I've got the book in my hand, so I may as well read it for you. Now at last they were beginning chapter 1 of the great story, which no one on earth has read, which goes on forever, in which every chapter is better than the one before.
That's the one. Thank you.
Beautiful. Lewis just has so many extraordinarily quotable bits in Narnia, and just so relatable. Yeah.
And these things seem to be at your fingertips, Tim. It's really, you make it accessible, and your enthusiasm on the subject is infectious. I mean, I now feel that this afternoon I should grab a Narnia book and read it now.
Yes, or you can watch the films if you'd like to. They're not on Netflix. I've checked.
Oh gosh. Well, thank you so much, and we'll now put on our final song, our final hymn.